So yeah, I'm going to introduce Brenna. This is a very informal, intimate conversation. Even though we are recording it, it'll be on our website as well. But I want people to feel comfortable uh, asking questions at any point in this presentation, because Brenna wants to talk about the subject of what we're talking about as best as she possibly can to meet all of our interests. So let me just tell you a little bit about Brenna. She is somebody that I cannot believe I've known for almost 18 years. She works for the National Academy of Public Administration, which is a congressionally chartered organization that's nonpartisan, non-political, and it basically does research for and assists Congress, federal agencies, cities, states, public entities, and a lot of international government organizations. We are largely governed by a group of about 1,000 fellows, which I happen to be one. I don't think anyone yet on the call is, but there were other fellows that RSVP'd, so maybe we will see them in a minute. But she has been doing studies and then overseeing and managing studies and managing not just the work itself, but really trying to negotiate the work when we get interest by any of these organizations I mentioned to you. So fairly recently, she was involved in this big project, the title of which you see on the screen, Bringing AI to Main Street. And we had figured out a while ago within our chapter that AI was something that we should be trying to learn more about in a really concerted, deliberate way, especially how AI will affect the public sector. So we're really anxious to hear what she and her colleagues learned from this study, and also what other things might be down the pike, in terms of the pipeline that NAPA might be involved in, as well as maybe other things she knows that could be going on that are outside of even NAPA's purview. So with that, let me just tell you, she went to AU and got her MBA. Before that, she went to University of Delaware and got her undergraduate degree there in, I think it was human resource management. So she has an education and a background that really is perfect for not only the work we're talking about today, but the kind of work she's been doing for almost 3 decades. So with that, Brenna, welcome, and I'll let you go, and you could just tell me when you want me to advance the slides, and I'm happy to do it.
Perfect. Thanks, Judy. I think you could advance to the next slide. I appreciate the introduction and that you got it all right. I think one of our most unique assets is our over 1,000 fellows. And I would say that even if Judy weren't on this call, because they really represent thought leadership in all areas of public administration, all levels of government, practitioners, former cabinet heads and leadership, city mayors and council members and governors, and then academics that have, spent often their entire life, professional life, really diving into public administration issues. And then the other roughly third are those are the third are federal, third are about state and local, and then academics and other associations, and some private sector folks. So whenever we have a study, we bring a group of fellows together to oversee the study work that the professional study staff does. In this case, we had fellows that may be, these names may be familiar to some of you, but the expert advisory group that oversaw this work was Lisa Benjamin, Barcelo Giagali, Nick Hart, Chris Merle, and Costas Terregas. And they brought together experience from local management and leadership, as well as, again, academics understanding these issues, AI and technology concerns and experience, as well as thinking about some of the policy implications. And they oversaw a study team Again, probably most of these names won't be familiar, but I do want to give the team a little bit of attention since they really did the hard work. And it was Nancy Augustine, Roger Kodat, Miles Murphy, James Higgins, and Kate Keelan. These names might sound familiar to Judy. I'm sorry if they're not to others, but this work came to us about a year and a half ago. We started talking with Google. And they had been involved with several good government groups and other organizations to think about some of the federal implications of AI and what that looks like. And what they wanted to do this time was to really shift the focus to the conversations around what's happening in cities and counties and regions, arguing that local governments are where AI economic impacts will be felt most directly. I mean, I think we all know that, right? You see, you're on the street and you see what's happening, and we talk a lot about the laboratories of innovation and trying new things. So they came to us, and it was a great time because over the last few years, we've really been building out some of our intergovernmental experience and developed established a Center for Intergovernmental Partnerships. And really, what we were trying to do there was there's often organizations that advocate and focus on one level of government, focus on what happens at the cities or the counties or the states. But what we really wanted to do is take all of the knowledge and expertise and experience that we, through the fellows, have had in the federal space and look at what that means when you really take the whole life cycle of a policy, of a budget decision, of a regulation. What does that look like at every level? And really be able to understand that. So we were able to get this work under contract and delivered the report in September of 25. We're able to do a couple of interesting road shows and did a sort of a launch session with Google and did a panel discussion, included Senator Mike Rounds, who's been active in this space. So it was a really nice way to kind of see a lot of different perspective. We had several fellows who spoke on it, as well as I did. So a great opportunity to really start thinking about what this looks like. And the report kind of looks at a couple of things. What is this AI ecosystem? It looks at how do you have a sense of, and how can you figure out how ready your community is? Not just the government, not just the citizens, not looking at collectively what this community, where this community is on that spectrum. And then it also included a number of examples of both economic development strategies to consider and case examples of innovative use of AI that are driving the local economy. That next slide is a perfect transition. It's like you read my mind, Judy. One of the things that the study started with was kind of setting the landscape a little bit and just talking about the economic implications of AI. I don't think it's going to surprise anyone that the thought is that they are profound for sure and will continue to be. Some of the research that the study team did identified some projections and talked about indicating that they would anticipate that, what did they say? That it could contribute up to 1.5 percentage points to annual productivity growth, 0.4 percentage points to total GDP growth by 2034. I mean, while these figures highlight transformational potential for AI at the national level, where the report quickly headed towards was the whole idea that there's some caution that should be taken because this doesn't automatically translate to the benefits at the community level. Local strategies definitely are essential to ensuring that AI-driven economic gains are equitably distributed and tailored to specific needs of municipalities. We quickly started talking about the impact that it could have on a labor market and the connections that would make to the broader economic success of a community, and really acknowledge that there's an expectation that there'll be significant change with most jobs evolving rather than disappearing. No surprise to anyone, I'm sure we're all seeing it. AI automates routine tasks, right? And hopefully when it's done well, it enables workers to focus on some of those higher value activities. I wouldn't be surprised if most of you have heard, the phrase that I've heard a few times recently, AI is not going to take our job, but someone who understands and utilizes AI more effectively might edge me out for that next job or that next promotion. It also talks about some of the risks of worse workforce, either disruption or displacement, particularly in roles susceptible to automation. So there's a lot of strategies in here and discussion about mitigating that risk. And the report definitely advocates for robust retraining and reskilling initiatives so that there's really a sense of empowering workers to adapt and not only adapt, but thrive in an AI enhanced economy. Excuse me. So by aligning economic development with workforce preparedness, there is really this hope and expectation that communities can turn some of these potential disruptions into opportunities for growth and resilience. I want to pause there as Judy, as you said, want to make sure that this is casual and interactive. I have no desire to listen to myself talk for half an hour straight. Didn't know if anyone had any thoughts or questions. If not, we can go to the next slide. All right, can make me talk a little bit more. Yeah, so we can go to Hannah.
So, okay, about AI. How are we able to know about data centers and how they're going to affect like different places in the country, especially like in Appalachia, America?
So that's a great question, and we do talk about that as one of the things to be thinking about and to recognize that there's opportunity for economic development. It could bring jobs, but there's also a lot of downsides. What is it doing to the into the environment? How it's affecting? How are they being established in a responsible way? And if you can be patient, there's a little bit more that this study talked about and that I was planning to talk about in here because it's a big piece of it. And it's also one of the more, I would say, rapidly evolving questions in this whole puzzle. So if we could, yeah. I'll definitely get to that, and I'm glad that you asked that. One of the
Awesome.
things,
Thank you.
yeah, sure. One of the things that this report looked at was some of the impacts and the statistics that we're seeing. It examined a bunch of different applications of AI with a focus on small and medium-sized enterprises or organizations. And by that, I really mean communities. We were looking at, again, these small and medium-sized cities, communities, towns, trying to steer clear of some of the leaders in bigger cities that might have just a whole other set of resources that might be able to, that would be more evident to them. So really thinking about what this looks like as the title would suggest on Main Street. Our high-level research indicated that the AI tools have largely improved on organizational operations. That's probably not a surprise. There are adjustments that must be made, but efficient change management and thinking about things like leaders who embrace this change and encourage responsible use of AI really is enabling improved adaptation to AI throughout the communities. What's more, many of these tools are enabling better service delivery because they're allowing workers to be more efficient and effective rather than replacing them outright. Not every outcome is positive, but these data points demonstrate some real possibilities. And as you look at the numbers on this slide, something that I found really interesting was there's certainly ranges in the impact of AI based on their skill levels in their field. Like, for example, the call center agents, those with mastery of the job experienced kind of negligible improvements to productivity, but the novices had a 34% increase in their productivity. Similarly, lower performing management consultants experienced a 43% improvement to quality versus 13% for the high performers. I suspect and would suggest that there's still a lot of research to be done, a lot of analysis here, and I think many of us that have thought about this in an academic way would wonder what some of the criteria is. But I think what this is saying is there really has to be thought in terms of digital literacy, in terms of other skills and how this complements that. So I'll be really interested to watch further studies and further analysis that dives down a little bit deeper in terms of how some of these AI functions are really helping. But you look at across the different, there's a number of different vocational areas here, and I think it's telling us what we already suspect that there's opportunities for just about every job in some capacity to support and streamline some of the activities. If we could go to the next slide. So we then started thinking about that AI ecosystem. What does that look like? And really kind of lumped it into three categories, three broader categories of who's doing what in this space as we think about building out more successful AI initiatives to build towards economic development and more successes in communities. And we have the innovators, and they're the ones developing and refining the models and the aspects of more technical aspects. And then you have the implementers, right? They're building the applications, they're kind of creating it and putting it out there. And then the enablers who are supplying the necessary hardware and software, like the physical pieces that support the operations. And in each community, these are going to look a little different, right? But one of the things that that we saw pretty early on is that consistent requirement of coordination across all three groups in order to build and grow these high performing ecosystems. Excuse me. If we could go to the next slide.
Could I just ask one question about the enablement?
Yeah.
Are there certain types of professions that are seen as greater likely to be more enabler type than others? Did you notice, or has there been any research about certain types of roles that people play or certain professions that people might have that make them that much more likely to be driven to enable greater use?
So I think in terms of building out this ecosystem and thinking about all the components that really go into a high functioning community that's really utilizing and thriving on AI, a lot of this has been about more of the physical, tactical enabling of the systems. But I think that, and I had the same thought when the team came up with this structure, is then there's all the people, the leaders who are, driving change, supporting change, talking about a whole bunch of other things in terms of, I think the big one that comes to my mind is communicating the benefits of AI in a way that kind of speaks to the so what, right? So what does this mean for you? What does this mean? How do we connect the dots so that these things are driving higher productivity, which means it's attracting more folks to the community. It's bringing in more revenue opportunities and resources, which, as we know, then leads to better service delivery, better quality of life. So I think of enablers as both the physical folks that are, here's the hardware, here's how we get the software, here's how we get all of the enabling functions, as well as all of the enablers that are socializing this and making the connection to those in the community who may be skeptical, who may be thinking bots are just going to come in and take my job, and really translating that to no, let's work on this together. I need your feedback. We need to be able to understand how to do this effectively, ethically, and to the maximum benefit. So I think it's those leaders in the communities and in all components, right? Leaders in the government level, leaders in in education, leaders in those that are influencing decision making across the board.
Yeah, when I see the word enabler or enablers, to me, from a change management perspective, I think it's so critical that we not just have champions that are kind of pushing the innovations out with whatever technology, hardware, or software that they need, but the enablers that are going to help to show how to actually implement these things in a way that are accepted, where we have employees that are ready to take on the
Yeah.
change, the systems that we're putting into place, so that, yeah, when you talk about things like digital literacy earlier, it made me think that it's so important for us to have a situation where the environment is accepting of change and that they're ready for change, not just that people are pushing the change out.
Right, right. I mean, I think the communities that have been most successful, it hasn't felt like something that's been done to the community. It's been something that the community has done together.
Yeah.
Um,
And Alan is saying, yeah, there may be a fourth box of communicators, people who are really trying to articulate in a much more understandable way. What is it and how's it going to make our lives better? Yeah.
you guys keep spoiling surprises.
Oh, sorry.
No, there's a whole we talk about this actually. I think this next slide kind of starts to get into that, as you know, as not every community is kind of what we've just been talking about, right? Like not every community and the citizens and businesses are set up to immediately reap the benefits of AI support, and as we were just talking, may not necessarily be um, all on board for what this means and how it'll help me personally, how it'll help my community. But there's, and there may be gaps between, as we were talking about, the innovators, the implementers, and the enablers, as well as thinking about all the other necessary components that we were just talking about. But these are components that communities, not just the government, really need to have in place. And we kind of bucketed them a little bit, again, trying to put some framing and be able to organize a whole host of things that really need to be happening to be successful. And the three that you see up there, the technical infrastructure, the workforce development, and open data, are three of the concepts that we feel we kind of kept seeing over and over again in the success stories. And some of the stories where communities were struggling, thinking about what was maybe not established and as well developed, and things like how do you plan data centers, that I think Hannah mentioned just a little while ago. And then that kind of overarching framing of tying it all together with community engagement. And we're going to talk about each of these a little bit more, but that framing of how we are messaging, how we're engaging, and a two-way communication. Like, here's what we know, but also we need input from you. We need to hear what's going to be the most effective and compelling way to move forward. Alan?
Yeah, thank you. There's actually 2 points here. One happens, I know in the city of Alexandria, our mayor has talked about us, the city government, getting much more involved with AI and everything, and how the workforce in the city government needed to be educated about how to use it and all the benefits. But some of us have raised with her that you have to be careful not get the city government ahead of the community members. They too need to go through an education process almost at the same time. Because if the community government people, if the government people get ahead and say, well, this is what we need, as the community members who vote and pay their taxes are going to go, well, wait a minute, what are you doing with this? And I don't understand. And so there's going to be a delay. It's probably some missed opportunities. The other aspect I just wanted to talk about is that I've been reading more and more, in particular here in Virginia, that data centers are becoming a hot button because they're not being viewed as a benefit to a local community, but more as a water thief in the area, and also a noise buzz that is astronomical. So there's that aspect too about data centers. I don't think there's been enough discussion about benefits and costs of data centers to local communities.
Well, it's funny because I was actually some of the things that we're talking about in these slides. There's a case study in the report that looked at what Virginia is doing And the statistic that they gave was that data centers account for 25% of the state's total electricity, which is the largest share of any state. So some of the ways that to address this demand is Virginia's primary energy provider is upgrading its networks and considering different ways to think about how to power all this. One of the things that they talked about, and again, this opens up some other discussions for sure, but nuclear technologies like small modular reactors, which I do not understand all that well. But what I understand from this whole little case example was states also collaborating with companies like Google. And full disclosure, Google did not ask us to promote what they're doing. We saw this as a viable example, and it was not done to promote. And they were fantastic to work with and did not completely appreciated our independence. But they're working with them because their data centers are a major part of Virginia's digital economy. So part of their commitment is to operate all data centers using carbon-free energy by, I feel like, 2030, and partnering with other organizations to source local renewable energy and battery storage. And trying to get to a place where these data centers can achieve like 90% carbon free energy. Again, there's a long way to go, but we highlighted that example because these are conversations that are happening already. Ryan, I see your hand up.
Talking on Alan's point about trying to educate both city council and the community as a whole. Has anybody seen that from the acting so the Department of Labor listed an initiative, I believe it was last month or maybe the month before, that they do have a set of 12 classes that they've sent out through the Department of Labor called Make America AI Ready, that offer 12 free classes to anybody who signs up. That can be done by phone, by website, or anywhere they have internet access, to educate people on how to make America involved in the AR marketplace.
I mean, that's fantastic. And I think we're seeing a lot more examples of platforms offering, certain education platforms offering free tools. New York City did something, their technology pipeline, there's a letter in there that I'm missing. But some of what they've done too is they've offered some coursework, and then once you finish that coursework and establish that you've completed it, it then enables you access to some job portals and some access to companies that are hiring. So there's a little bit more of that incentive too. On that end. So I think there's a lot more of those coming up. Thank you. You put it in you beat me to the punch. I was going to ask if you had a link to that. One other thing, just we kind of jumped ahead, but the data center conversation, there's also states that are now exploring moratoriums on further data center building and establishment. Maine legislature just passed something that I think is on the governor's desk right now, putting a moratorium on any additional data center development for things that you were mentioning, Alan, the environment, the noise pollution, the water usage, and so forth. And there's other states that are considering something similar. So it'll be interesting to see how communities respond. I think we can go to the next slide. So yeah, again, trying to organize a whole bunch of components to this and thoughts about how this affects communities. Thinking about the digital infrastructure, the broadband and fiber networks. Obviously, we know that if we want to really be able to utilize and adopt AI, we need reliable internet. We need it to be able to support cloud-based tools and a high volume of data transfer. There's also the important aspect of expanding affordable broadband access. We see these, internet deserts and areas that often marginalized and underrepresented communities that don't have the same access. Montgomery County has a couple of programs, FiberNet and MocoNet, which are trying to better enable equitable participation, because that's a key piece of this too. And I think the communities that are doing this the right way are taking that into account. We've kind of been talking about this, the power grid. How do we modernize it and think about different levels of energy required for this new modernized set of requirements? And decarbonizing obviously is going to be critical. Local governments can advocate for those upgrades and support these efforts, and they can also articulate concerns that they have as well, as like I said, we were seeing. We kind of talked about some of the concerns about the data centers. They're certainly necessary for reducing latency and improving reliability. And we did hear from some interviewees and some of the materials that the team reviewed that it also these data centers do create jobs in some ways. So then there's kind of, again, a lot of tension about both the positive and the negative. And I think we're going to continue to see those conversations and concerns. And then the cybersecurity, right? Protecting public systems, protecting the data to make sure that it is not vulnerable to any sort of hacks or abuse. So those are some of those things. Like I said, we talked a little bit about the data centers and some of the concerns as well. If we could go to the next slide. The workforce preparedness. We've kind of been talking about this, thinking about the great deal of disparity that comes from where folks are in the communities as it relates to AI, their comfort levels. There's certainly a variety of levels of sophistication and skepticism. There's definitely a ton of opportunities and a need for AI expansion to think about how it's going to impact jobs across the sectors, that potential for disruption, and the need for new skills. Governments and businesses and organizations can help ensure that the community can take advantage of new AI opportunities by offering training and reskilling programs. We talked about that a little bit. It's not just for its citizens, but it's for the employees that are working in these roles, and to ensure that as governments are advocating for these things, they understand them as well and recognize where it's going to be most useful, and to be able to speak confidently and with that right level of experience. A skilled workforce definitely attracts AI companies and ensures residents can access new job opportunities. And again, in an ongoing effort to reduce the degree of displacement or disruption, and ultimately to increase local incomes. There's a lot of different ways that can take shape. The workshops, online courses, certifications. There's a lot of partnerships that are being developed with local colleges or boot camps or tech firms that can grow that local talent and grow that pipeline. And this is just another way to drive economic growth with these programs and create employment opportunities as well.
Did you all see any patterns among the maybe best practices of the organizations you might have interacted with or encountered? Like, are bigger cities more likely to really have good strategies for reskilling and upskilling compared to like small cities or small areas of the country? Are there some patterns that we ought to be aware of and mindful of because they simply don't have the resources to be able to do some of what they need to do, even though they're really hungry and have an appetite for, AI or the building of data centers because they want jobs, but they don't have the capacity?
I would say there's a couple of things that we thought were interesting. So, of course, yes, you have a larger city with more resources and often maybe a heightened level of sophistication in some ways, right? But what we also saw was a lot of smaller towns are nearby to colleges. So there was a number of smaller communities that you wouldn't necessarily think would be as far along in this AI adoption and as engaged, but they have the opportunities through universities. So that and often there were partnerships set up where the universities recognized the value of providing these trainings, the classes at either partnering with local businesses for a reduced rate or providing some of these services with no cost because they are those communities that saw the potential down the road and the broader benefit to the community as a whole are doing innovative things. I think the other thing we noticed was in some of the communities where there might not have been as many partnerships with educators or other organizations, they were being very creative about identifying free resources. Things like even LinkedIn Learning. If you have a library card in many states, you have access to a lot of free training and learning. So I would say the only real through line was that the communities that were committed to moving this forward and saw the potential for economic growth are doing really creative things. And there was not a super high correlation of communities of this size or this demographics. It was the through line was the interest in creatively identifying opportunities.
And did you find in your work any sort of analysis out there that would have given a scorecard on how are we in terms of digital literacy in the public sector, especially at the state and local level? Because I know I did some work with Bloomberg and Johns Hopkins, and that was part of what we were trying to do was encourage data literacy across cities, no matter the size. But it was really hard to gauge what the current state was. I think there was some belief that there was greater literacy than there really was. And so I'm just kind of curious as to whether anybody out there has done some sort of analysis that would give us a sense as to how ready are we or how ready are we not to do some of the very basic things that we need to be doing to move into an AI, environment.
Right. And I feel like it's evolving so quickly that when this team started looking, I don't believe that they found that scorecard. Perhaps it is in production now. We do have a readiness framework that we talk about a little bit, and perhaps that is something that we could do as the next phase of this work is now that there's we've identified some of the key indicators that perhaps we could do that. I would be very interested to see I'd be interested to see what that looks like because again, my hunch is that it's not going to be a very easy correlation to size and demographics. I think there'll be outliers, of course, the very large cities, but there was a lot of interesting case examples that were in parts of the country that you wouldn't immediately think of as, the beacons for digital literacy and tech savvy behavior. So
yeah. And we've seen that in the work that I do, that certain functions, certain missions within a city government or a county government are way more savvy than other functions and missions. And so that's really where sometimes we think there's great literacy, but it's only because we're really spotlighting the people where they've made huge investments, but lots of jobs where that hasn't been a priority.
Well, and then also I think about it that as you go down to different levels of government and smaller uh, organizations, you have folks that are focused on one set of objectives and responsibilities, but there's a lot of jacks of all trade. So then, how much of that translates as folks are often asked to wear multiple hats and be engaged in a lot of different parts of a municipality's government functions. So I'll be interested to see how much of that translates over time. I think we could go to the next slide. I didn't see any other hands up. Um, uh, and we've kind of been covering some of this as we've been talking, but community level open data definitely can enhance AI applications, across a variety of sectors, thinking about things like real estate and transportation, health and finance. And while obviously not all data is suitable for open sharing, and privacy laws obviously need to be observed, the availability of high quality open data will definitely improve AI learning and performance. This brought into the discussion, I think, the really critical piece of this, the data governance. And specific types of data can make AI tools more effective for community organizations, and the data owners should be creating governance structures that provide transparency, ease of access, quality, integrity, thinking about the impact of strong data governance as it fosters responsible AI innovation. Certainly reduces business risk. And I think the most important piece of this is builds public trust, and creates a stable environment for AI-driven growth. And it kind of gets back to what we were talking about before, about the importance of that communication, sharing it both ways, and being able to provide information in a transparent, easily digestible way so that we do build the trust with the community members. I think just thinking about some of the other things that we heard when we were talking about, the successful communities and what they were doing, they were thinking about things like staff training on data hygiene, and regular impact assessments as it relates to privacy, to ensure that there's this ongoing monitoring of this. Otherwise, we've all seen the challenges that arise when we're not responsible and thinking and using open data most responsibly. Just thinking about, some of the other things that we heard that I think are really important and that were a little bit thematic in terms of those that have been more successful in moving this forward. Things like creating a vendor registry of trusted AI vendors for community businesses and organizations, so that as they're thinking about what they're going to do next, they have the confidence to move forward knowing that these are responsible, ethical organizations. Really, and thinking about evaluation methods and thinking about how to promote strategic AI adoption using things like pilot programs, sandboxes, looking at those things that, can tell us a lot in terms of what the return of investment is, the benefit costs analysis tools that will, help decision making. And who doesn't love a good dashboard? Being able to take those statistics and put that out so that community adoption really is as transparent, and really helps, again, to make those connections about, how this is working and, working well. I think, there's also the interesting thing that came up from the study, and then we've been thinking a lot about is, and how is it aligning with state and national guidelines to prevent confusion around surrounding AI use in community organizations. Of course, this has gotten a little bit murky and unpredictable as of last year when the executive order came out, to ensure a national policy framework and really limit the state's ability to establish some of the its own goals and regulatory requirements. There's certainly group of folks that really see this EO as being, a violation of the 10th Amendment, and really limiting, and there, I think there's a concern that it's prioritizing potential innovation over rights protection and thinking about, the improper conditioning of federal funds. So I'm sure that'll continue as a lot of things are these days. It'll work through some of the courts, and there really isn't any congressional action at this point that can further codify this. But I think it'll be an interesting spot to watch for a while.
Yeah.
The good news. I'm sorry, Judy.
I don't know if anybody else on the call has any knowledge of this, but for years, Alan and I, because we worked at GAO, we're pretty darn familiar with the quality of data that's out there. And, I put HUD on the high risk list because HUD's data was so bad that we did not think the agency or Congress could even make any decisions about their programs and the funding of their programs. Now, I know improvements have been made, but the whole idea of open data, there's got to be, this really big assumption that the quality of the data that's going to be made available and actually used as a part of the AI platform has to be high quality. And I'm just curious as to whether we have any sense as to the progress maybe governments have made in ensuring that the quality of their data is good.
I think we're living in an interesting time to have confidence that the data quality is there. We did one of the communities, and I forgive me, I don't remember which municipality this was, said it can't be all data. It has to be that one of the priorities has to be doing everything in our power to discern and identify what is quality open data and what needs to be, I remember this because she said it feels wrong to exclude data because the idea is you always want the data, but if it's garbage in, it's going to be garbage out. I do think that communities are struggling with this, and I do think that this is an area where larger, more resourced communities have the ability to tackle this issue a little bit more. But at the end of the day, like you said, if you have agencies that are on the high risk list because of the data that's flowing to states and localities is flawed, it's going to remain an issue for sure. I wish I had more insight into how to fix that, but again, maybe that's another study we can work on in the future. There was some interesting positive examples of San Jose, for example. They put out an AI fact sheet with their vendor registry so that and they update it frequently to at least steer folks in the right direction as they make those decisions. And Tempe, Arizona does, they update their ethical AI policy semi-annually. And one of the things that they said was so important was that continuous feedback and ensuring that perspectives from their community were integrated into those policy updates. Alan?
Yeah, I think there's several things about data quality. I mean, one, almost all data have limitations. So if organizations start at least identifying the limitations so you can feel a little bit more confident in them, data governance structures can actually have definitions of what would be high quality data and people agreeing to that. And I will say just here locally, I'm involved with homelessness, and I chair a committee under that with gaps and needs. 7 years ago, the data in the homeless management information system was horrible and unusable. Today, the data I would say is at 99% accuracy. And what has driven it is that the more that we got to accuracy, the more we felt better to use the data. And now today, the data is driving major decisions where our Gaps and Needs Committee every month starts with on a topic, but but starts with the data out of the homeless management information system because we have confidence in the data. And that drives the policy conversations about where we should be going as a city. So it's kind of a catch-22. The more you get comfortable with the accuracy, the more you'll use it. And the more you use it, it pushes them to make the data more accurate. So
do you think that was that the increase in the accuracy was the greater push because it's being used more, or are there other things that happened that drove the higher accuracy?
actually, it was the desire to we wanted to make decisions based upon data, but we knew we couldn't do that until the accuracy reached a certain level and we felt more comfortable with it. So it was like you need to get to a certain level before we can start using it. And as we start using it, we in our conversations we could find inaccuracies in the data and send it back for improvements. To today, again, we have. I mean, I'm quite impressed with the team because they have really gotten to the data where we are always using it on a monthly basis to make recommendations on decisions. So
That's very optimistic and leaves me hopeful.
yeah.
So I think again we've been talking about a lot of this. The team created this framework, incorporating all of the elements of what we've been talking about. No surprise that it's an iterative circular design, thinking about identifying the requirements, designing, developing, testing, piloting, and deploying, and then informing that into the next round of iteration and improvements. Some key ingredients that were similar or themes throughout this was what we've been talking about. No one level of government or single entity, no single entity can really do this on their own. So you really do need the support and the buy-in of local governments, of business, educators, nonprofits, and the residents, right? That community engagement piece that we keep talking about really is critical, and thinking about, again, this is, I think, a really great example of meeting communities where they are. Is it interviews? Is it surveys? Is it town halls? Is it forums? And finding that right mix so that folks are engaged and feel like they're receiving the information and have the opportunity to help shape what that looks like. I know a lot of communities were doing asset mapping to kind of get a baseline of what they already have, to kind of, how do you figure out what you need if you don't really know what you already have. And then what we've been talking about, that clear identification and communication of shared benefits. Like, why does this work for all of this, and what's in it to build trust and really see that progression. I think we can go to the next slide. And just real quickly, as I said, we also did a number of thanks, Mary, of case examples, not full-on case studies, but really looking at what communities are doing and where they've had success. These categories, we talked about a little bit, some of them earlier, but pretty diverse set of categories in terms of who's experiencing some of these benefits. And what I think really stood out to me is, like, there was an example of customer experience, improving the customer experience in Hershey, Pennsylvania, in that hospitality space and then there was also an AI powered lending platform in Kansas City that really decrease the time to make decision making around loans, and an AI-powered robot for wood recycling in Oakland, California. So what the team really tried to do was find some pretty diverse set of uses of AI to really drive home the point that there are examples that really any municipality could really relate to. There's a lot of different ways to identify value of AI. We could go to the next slide. The report was not heavy on recommendations. It was really more about, the readiness framework, and really identifying all of the components and analyzing what's going on. But in terms of those high level takeaways, it really felt very much like the urgency is here. Oh, it looks like, Catherine, you mentioned that there's a law that was passed.
Yeah, in in Washington State, your previous slide was talking about, I saw something about chatbots and how government uses them. And we just had a law passed and it's going to go into effect in 2027. It's the first law, I think, in the country where chatbots will have to disclose that they are AI and not chatbots anymore. So,
I think that's really important, and it kind of, I mean, I think about the number of times where I think folks have thought that they were talking with a real person.
yeah, so we have to make sure our government systems are doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it'll say that you're having a conversation with an AI powered application.
Yeah. I think so. And I think it has to tell you every 3 hours. And I'm looking at this now. I'm looking my AI overview on Google, and it says it has to tell you every 1 hour for minors. And it mandates safety protocols for self-harm and things like that. But yeah, I think it's just making sure that people know that they are talking to real, they're not talking to real people. And you can sue over violations as well.
Really?
Yeah. So.
Well, I mean, that seems like a responsible way to proceed. It'll be interesting to see who follows suit there.
Yeah.
No pun intended. Yeah, as I was saying, the recommendations are really around, it's interesting. Start now, waiting increases the risk of falling behind. However, the caveat being, you do have to ensure that you have certain elements in place, but I think it's recognizing the urgency that this is a rapidly evolving field, and that waiting to even take those first steps is not going to create a lot of value. Investing in those foundations, that one almost seems a little bit like, well, yeah, because you can't really get very far without it. I do think that the center it on equity is one that sometimes even well-meaning communities kind of lose track of, and it's really critical to make sure that the decisions we're making, the way we're offering opportunities to folks, is really reaching all of its citizens and not ignoring or under paying less attention to some of those marginalized communities. We talked about the agile governance, the AI agile governance framework, and that's going to continue to evolve. And I appreciate some of what I heard today, that I think it broadens out the conversation and gives us some new things to think about. The engagement, we talked about that quite a bit, and yeah, no one can do this alone. No one locality is able to do that, and that was the kind of what we heard over and over again. I think we can go to the next page. So this is just some of the other things that we're working on at the Academy. We continue to have a bunch of different things going on. Judy, I'm sure you're familiar with a number of these. We've had a multi-season series in partnership with ACT-IAC and GovExec, as we refer to as the TV show. It was a number of videos just talking about AI in the public sector. Some of the topics they covered over the 3 seasons was different use cases in local government, as well as in federal agencies, and some of the policies and emerging trends. Our fellows and staff continue to provide blogs and other analyses, sharing insights from academic research, from lessons learned from practitioners, and policy implications. Our president, James Christian, has had a number of guests on his podcast talking about different elements of AI governance and implications at all levels of government. And our technology standing panel has been talking about AI for a while. Certainly, as we rolled out one of our grand challenges of public administration, making government AI ready, but really taking that on and saying, what does that actually look like? And they continue to build on a call to action that I think they put out about 2 years ago, which is responsibly using AI to benefit public service at all levels of government. So they've had a number of folks that have engaged and gotten more active as they think through that set of challenges. And next month, they'll convene a virtual panel that's called Advancing Trust in Human Agency in an AI Era Governance. I have the QR code there. It's in the PowerPoint, and if you head to our website, www.napawash.org, you can find more information about that. So if that's something that you think might be interesting, I would highly encourage it. And as we're thinking about what's on the horizon, we're in the process of developing a new curriculum for our Agile training, which is a fee-for-service training module. The one we're working on now is AI governance for Agile principles of AI governance. Sorry, I had a hard time with that one. So we're working to get that out so that sometime, hopefully later this year, early next year, that will be available as a combination of asynchronous and synchronous learning modules. And then just the other day, we were approached by an organization within the federal government that is looking to develop AI working group governance. So we've been asked to propose how we would work with them to establish policies, guardrails, and governance structures that would enable responsible internal AI use and also oversee some of the functions to support the organizational mission and ensure that AI is being used both internally and as ways to meet the mission of the organization. I'm hopeful that in the coming weeks, I would be able to share more of those details, but that was something that just came up about 2 weeks ago, and we're really optimistic about being able to play that role. And it was really nice to hear to have someone ask if we could do that. So those are some of the things that we're working on. We continue to monitor what's happening at all levels of government and thinking about some of the implications of policy decisions and regulation that's coming out. Really appreciate hearing about some of the things that are happening, especially disclosing that you're a bot is, I think, a really positive step. But that's pretty much what I had. I'm looking at the clock. I know it's getting late, but I'll pause there.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, we had given ourselves a little bit more time this time going to 8:30, but I am happy to just open it up for anybody that might not have had a chance to ask a question. We don't have to wait till 8:30 if everybody is like ready, but I'd love to know if anyone who hasn't asked a question might have a question for Brenna. As we go forward, because AI is going to be one of our sort of lines of effort or areas of interest for the next couple of years, I'm personally really interested in sort of the ethical side of understanding how we protect the interest of government when we use AI, that protecting not just the data of individuals, but ensuring that we are meeting citizens where they are, in a way that ensures not a biased sort of algorithm for how things are decided or done. I'm definitely interested in the quality of data because it is, bad data in, bad data out kind of thing that is always a worry if we're going to depend on data to drive AI activities. And then like who audits the AI systems? You know, I mean, there's such risks. I don't know who actually comes in and kind of checks it out to make sure it kind of meets all of the requirements that it needs to meet to ensure what citizens or communities are really hoping it will do. So there's that whole, you know, that's my audit side of my background, but I've always been kind of curious as to who checks. Do we have the capacity to know how to check? You know, because talk about readiness. We may not be digitally ready as much as we'd like to, but I don't even know if we're ready to understand how to check to make sure everything that needs to happen is really happening.
I
And
mean,
Hannah asked the question, how will it affect West Virginia?
I said to someone the other day, like my crystal ball is back ordered on Amazon. Otherwise, I would have a really brilliant answer. But I do think that West Virginia is an interesting, could be an interesting microcosm. Just thinking about some of the shifts in the industries that have driven economic prosperity and success. Is there more of an interest in shifting to something that might be more digitally driven? And you know, I think Hannah, you were the one that asked the question about data centers too. So when we think about making decisions that are in the best interests of the communities in terms of environmental impact as well as economic impact, I think it'll be a really interesting state to watch. I wish I knew more definitively. I wonder if you have a thought about it, Hannah, and what you observe as someone who is in West Virginia. It wasn't meant to be answer the question with a question, but you know, I think it'll be a really interesting to watch.
Yeah, yeah.
I
Oh,
definitely think it's a lot. I think it's a really loaded question. Obviously, you're not going to know everything because we're still on trial and error with this whole thing.
Yeah.
Like, we're learning, we're growing, we're trying to understand what is happening. And technology is definitely taking a huge step at this point in time. And it's a lot. Like, it's a lot to take in because it's crazy. Like, I mean, you think about like the 80s or 90s, like cell phones and things like that. Like, we didn't have the things like we do now. And I'm not trying to sound like I'm old. I'm only 28. But still, like, you know, it's like we're really growing and we have to like take the risk in order to learn what is the full risk and then handle it accordingly, of course.
I think you hit a key word, risk, right? So, like doing it in an informed way, trying to gather as much information to then make reasonable, agreed upon decisions about that risk. And that's going to be a key piece of it. And I think the communities that are really looking to fully understand it and to have that dialogue and to make sure that folks both get the information they need, but also provide the information back are going to be the most successful. And Judy, to your point about auditing, when you have so many stakeholders coming together, it is a really interesting question about who
Well, I
should
mean,
do it and how to do it.
I think it's very essential, especially in Appalachia, because, you know, we deal with a lot of barriers. You know, unfortunately, the education is not where it needs to be. Healthcare is not where it needs to be. And then having, you know, the information come in, I think it's great because it could help with, like, as somebody like me that is going to go to law school, that information is essential. Like, there's certain things that only a library can do so much with, and it's so much there and it's more free formed and you can handle it accordingly and you can address it the way it needs to be with time.
I think you hit the nail on the head. Catherine, I think the governance and the training to understand governance is vital for government. So it's keeping us behind. I think you're absolutely right. And we've even internally, we've been talking about, we just had this conversation today about being more structured and explicit about what our own internal governance looks like. And how to make decisions about how to use it the most effectively. What are we requiring of people in terms of training and understanding? And we do try really hard at the academy to do what we suggest others should do with mixed results sometimes. Are these pushes being made in these discussions to push advanced sciences of high energy physics to better address more law and tech issues? Um, Ryan, I'm not sure I fully understand that question. Could you elaborate a little bit?
Um, so like most of the advancements in electronics has come from the fact of like EV log or we're able to make components smaller and smaller and more complicated, and the essential materials needed to make it. So when they're talking about building the computer, are there discussions in the back room about just where we're needing to go from it? Because right now the EV chips that are being used in most high electronics, that was like a 20-year project that they had to invest millions of resources into in order to get the nano chip. Are
So,
we taking that long leap forward because or Moore's law has been, a pretty much computerized thing for the last 40 years.
mhm.
But eventually we'll hit to the point where the things are so complicated that it's hard for anybody to understand it.
Well, and I think so. I don't know the answer completely, but what I think about is I really have to thank my daughter's sixth grade science teacher for years and years ago saying it doesn't matter how good a scientist you are if you can't translate that to what it means for other people, right? And she was a big proponent of encouraging everyone to think about science and communication and to master both of those things. Because if you're doing these things and you can't explain it to others, how are we going to move forward? And I think there's a scenario here where as we think about bringing all these folks to the table, there's got to be the highly technical people that understand what this really requires and what needs to happen that can also, or someone that can translate that to what it means to the citizens and make those connections in terms of what it's going to require, what some potential trade-offs are, what the risks are, and do that in a way that moves the ball forward. So I feel like I'm not doing a great job of answering some of these questions, but they're hard.
Well, I mean, part of it is it's hard to know where we think we're going to end up and what do we need to know to be able to get there.
Yeah.
So, it is difficult. I worry sometimes, I think there's so much advantage to AI. I worry that sometimes it's seen as this shiny object that everyone's just really excited about
Yeah.
and rushing to try to take advantage of what they believe are the real benefits of AI. I think that all the Hannahs of the world, when she gets her law degree, the Hannahs of the world are the ones who are going to be protecting us in terms of privacy laws and
Mhm.
how do we protect our data? How do we make sure the data is going to be used in a ethical way? All of those things are probably going to be the things that are the guardrails that'll maybe slow things down a little bit. But a lot of the cities and counties I work with right now, they are so lean, they're not hiring. They're in hiring freezes. But man, will they go gangbusters on AI because they think that's their fix. That I don't have to hire more people, I'll have AI, and the AI will replace the, people that I can't hire. So that And the problem with that is they're going to lose the human touch, the human in the loop. That is the one who's making sure that whatever we're designing and whatever we're actually implementing or rolling out and implementing, that there's the human aspect that ensures that we are doing everything in the right way instead of just doing it because it's the easy way to operate with less people.
And it is that big, it's as we were saying, it can't replace people and it shouldn't replace people. But thinking about, how to use it most responsibly and how to free up more of the human pieces of it. I mean, we did a study for Veterans Benefit Administration. This is at least 10 years ago now, and we were still talking about it, bots, but even some of the decisions in establishing, eligibility, the first set of questions are all binary, yes or no. Uh-oh, looks like Judy might be, but she's back. Those kind of decision trees that you could put that into a program and then bring it to the human when there's really a determination of is this a 30% eligibility versus 50 or 60. So maybe we were ahead of our time.
Yeah.
You know what?
They didn't like the answer.
So what's interesting though is thinking about like, working in a state environment, state government environment that's very union heavy. And we work, I work in the office of the insurance commissioner. And so there's fear about AI taking jobs,
Yeah.
right, in a union environment. And then also at the same time, so our organization is slow and old and is been, is trying to get up to modern times. And I think they need to because we regulate insurance industry and also help consumers in the insurance industry. So we do both things. And the insurance industry is using AI for all their stuff,
Yeah.
right? So we have to be responsive and saying, okay, they're going to get way ahead of us and we're supposed to be regulating them. So just now we're starting to pilot AI usage and kind of figuring out which ways we can use AI to both improve our work without costing jobs and then also helping catch up with industry.
Well, when you come back and report out some of your findings, can I please be invited?
Yeah.
It's
So,
fascinating.
listen, Brenna, thank you so much. I really appreciate this conversation and the fact that so many people stayed on for the call, even though they might have been expecting only to stay on for an hour. I am going to stop recording, but I do know that somebody has a question for you, and I'd like to give them an opportunity to ask that question. But I feel like I need to respect their privacy by trying to stop the recording. So I'm ending the call. I'm ending the session. Everything that we've talked about so far will be on our website for anybody that wants to look at it again or share it with others. And let me see how I can stop recording. Here we go.